Welcome to But Enough About Me, a podcast about other people. My name is Tyler Andrews. I'm a Nashville-based photographer, husband, and father. I'm trying to collect the stories of everyone around me, whether we're best friends or total strangers. I want to know what made you the person you are today. Welcome to 2020, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. Guys, a quick word right off the top. It's an election year. I'm not sure if you realize that or not, but there's a presidential election coming up in America, and all indications are that this one is going to be just as rowdy and unkind and unfriendly as the last one. So I want to take a quick moment to encourage everyone. This election season, we can all be passionate and have strongly held beliefs. It is, in fact, imperative that we are passionate and have strongly held beliefs. However, in the midst of that, do not lose sight of the humanity of everyone else, especially the people that we disagree with. Whatever that might be, whoever that might be, whatever they might look like or think or do. Please, 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 if you're listening to this show, hopefully it's because you have compassion and love for other humans, no matter how different they are. And I want to encourage you to embrace that when your friend on Facebook or your uncle or whomever voices an opinion that you find in diametric opposition to your own. Okay, that's enough of that's Tyler's soapbox for the day. Moving right along, today's episode is it's somebody that I have known for nearly a decade. I'm meeting this man had a profound impact on me at a very specific point in my life, and it's definitely an example of when sometimes people come into your life when you're ready to meet them, and had they come in before that, it wouldn't have worked out, but it did. That's definitely the case here. This man is one of the sweetest, kindest, most loving humans you will ever meet. He has a heart the size of Texas. It takes a special kind of person, a big-hearted one, to desire to go into hospice care, which is what he does. I met this man about 10 years ago at my church in a men's small group, and we have been friends ever since. We have a common connection, and we're both from the Northeast. He, though, has far more bona fides in that area than I do. He's been there a lot longer. He is not married. He does not have any kids, and he is a big-time traveler. He actually just got done going to Mexico for 3 weeks. Guys, I am so pleased to get to introduce to you my very, very good friend, Mr. Jacques Sirois. So we're good to go. Are you nervous?
Nope.
Good. Okay. Because it's really just the technology makes it weird.
I know you.
That's true. You do.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing this.
Okay.
Did you listen to any of the episodes?
No, I don't even know what this is all about. I have an idea, but I don't know what it's all about.
Okay. It's just your story.
Yeah.
That's all. So, first things first, where were you born?
I was born in a place called Winooski, Vermont, which is just outside of Burlington, Vermont. And beautiful little place, but it's too damn cold to be there now.
That's right, because I grew up for a long time in Maine, and that was one of the first things when I met you. I was like, I know that accent.
And I don't think I have an accent, so I guess...
Not a strong one,
No.
but yeah.
Yeah.
When were you born?
I was born in 1951, so at the moment I'm going to be turning 69 next year.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think I met you on your 60th birthday.
Yeah, that's quite a while back.
1951 in Vermont.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about your folks.
Okay, my mother was is first citizen American. Her parents came from Canada. I don't know exactly where they came from. She was one of 13. We're not really too sure about that, meaning there was an adopted uncle.
Okay.
And we're not sure if she was the 13th or if Uncle Roland was the 13th. My father came from a family of 13.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. And I love telling my story about how I describe my family. I had 9 sisters, 1 bathroom, and 3 brothers. So I come from a family of 13.
No way.
And you want to know about my parents? My mother got married at the age of 29 and had 13 of us. She had her first at the age of 30 and her last at 43 with 2 sets of twins in between.
Whoa.
So that's my parents.
That's one right on top of another.
Oh, excuse me, I forgot to say my father migrated from Canada up near Maine, Jackson, Maine, in that area. My father was on the Canadian side there, and he met my mother in Montreal while he was in the service.
Did they immigrate together?
No, my mother was born.
Oh, she was born in America.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
In fact, she kind of set the example for me. She was she was born and died in the same bedroom.
What?
And she was 94 years old and never moved out of that house a day of her life.
Wow. Did she travel?
Later in life.
Say with 13 kids, you probably don't travel.
Yeah, really later in life. The furthest travel she went, which was pretty amazing. I need to mention also that we were French Catholics.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother was a very strong Catholic, that when I left the Catholic Church, I tell everyone, I think she's still praying that I go back. And I had a brother-in-law that was Muslim, and he was from Turkey. And he brought my mother to Turkey. She was in her 80s, and her biggest thrill was that she went to the place that Mary's supposed to have died and was buried at. So, yeah,
She was pretty excited about that.
she was that's about really the furthest she traveled. And but as far as traveling, no, not really.
But still, I mean, that's pretty amazing just to have spent your entire life in one house.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And I spent 58 years in that house.
Did you really?
Yeah.
I knew you spent a long time there.
Yeah.
Man, how many? Okay, so you said 3 bedrooms? Is that what you said?
No, I never said how many.
How many bedrooms?
There was 5
Okay.
bedrooms. They weren't that big. It was they used to call the old mill houses. My grandparents on my mother's side came to work in the woolen mills. And it was a mill house that eventually my mother and a couple sisters bought the house. My mother stayed there. She took care of my grandmother until she died. And I stayed there. Everyone had taken off, but I stayed back.
Mm-hmm.
And I bought the house from my parents. And my father died at the age of 65. He was a diabetic.
Okay.
And my mother, like I said, was 94.
That's a long time to be.
And I was their caregiver for 32 years.
Oh my gosh. Where are you in the family line?
I'm the 8th. I'm the second son. And I have 6 older sisters. People do not know how trauma it is to have all these girls in one house outnumbered with one bathroom.
That blows my mind. Did you ever get to use the toilet, or did you?
We heard the same thing. We will not be broadcasting that on this podcast. I have a house that I own by myself, and I have 2 bathrooms.
Just in case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you are not allowed to use the master bathroom. It's mine.
That's fantastic. Okay. What did your dad do?
My father was a master of he was really, first of all, one of the big plants there was General Electric,
Yeah.
and we made armaments for the government.
Okay.
And my father worked there a couple different capacities, but when he retired, he was a painter, in which he used to paint the parts that went onto the guns. And,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Okay. So he was a factory worker.
yeah.
Cool. Okay. And that was his whole career. That's what he did the whole
Right.
time.
And he was a handyman also.
Sure. Yeah.
So.
I'm sure it's not true, but it seems like everyone alive back then was a handyman because you had to keep things running.
Yeah.
And mom was a stay-at-home mom.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
oh yeah.
Yeah. That many kids. That's insane. How was their marriage? Do you remember growing up?
Well, if you'd have talked to me before therapy, I could have told you a different story than what I would tell you now. So maybe I should tell you before therapy.
Oh, sure,
Okay?
sure.
Yeah. You know, my parents took pride in the fact that they never fought in front of us. There was never an argument in front of us. We never knew anything like that went on. And, they seem to have been pretty proud about it. And I can say this now because they're not alive. And I think that it was a disservice to us
Mm.
because we didn't know what conflict was like
Mm.
growing up. So later on in life, I have 12 siblings that mostly we hate each other
Oh.
because we never knew what conflict was all about. So, and it's funny, it's slowly coming around, but it's taken a long time.
Yeah. Man. So tell me about growing up in this house with you said 7 older siblings, and then eventually
Five
was
young,
that 5 more after?
yeah.
Was it just pure chaos at all times, or was your mom a taskmaster? How did that feel?
And now you're going to talk to me from therapy on.
Yeah.
Things that I thought were normal
Yeah.
were not normal.
Yeah.
And again, I can say this because I don't think that any of my siblings will hear this podcast because I ain't telling them about it, first of all,
Oh.
because I'm going to be talking about them too, maybe. Anyways, where was I going with this?
Chaos in the family.
Yeah, there was so much that was going on with all these people that I felt like I was lost.
Hmm.
And again, we never talked about our conflicts, yet it was always present.
Yeah.
And it was always tension. And you never got away with anything, I guarantee you.
Yeah.
Because somebody saw you.
Yeah, I would imagine. Goodness.
Yeah. And so, there was a lot of chaos. I know what I was going to say too. The thing with, and I gave the excuse for my parents was they did the best they could.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm looking back, but they never apologized. And I think that that's the tough part. I think that that's where they put that void in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Because we went around like we couldn't say anything about it against our parents. And they were good people.
Right.
But we couldn't say anything against them because it was being disrespectful.
Yeah.
But
do you think they realized that they had things to apologize for?
no more than I didn't realize that until I went through therapy.
Right.
Once I go through therapy and I start understanding things, I understand that now.
Yeah.
But I didn't understand that back then. I had to go with the excuse, well, they did the best they could. Yes, they did. And they went up, in some areas, they went above and beyond.
Well, let's talk about that for a second then. What are some areas that they went above and beyond?
Wow. In my case, I would have to think of, on my father's side, he had a sister who, my father's family were farmers. And my father went into service, met my mother, married, and came to Vermont. His youngest sister, who I think was his favorite, wanted to become a nun. And the family, her family were not supportive of it. So was my father not only raising 13, he was putting his sister through college at the same time in order that she could become a nun and a nurse.
Oh, okay. I was like, I didn't. Okay.
Yeah, it was the nurse part of it. Yeah, and so, um, I really, it's like one of these questions, your mind goes blank. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and maybe something will come up down the road, but
Yeah.
it's just, truthfully, my growing up was not a happy place for me. If you want to talk about chaos, I was, so far down the chain that either the older ones were fighting among themselves or they were trying to find their position in the house. And, when I love what my sister said to me one time. She said, we were talking about the breakup of the family structure. And
Hmm.
she said, when you're the baby, you get all the attention. And then the next one comes along and they get the attention. And that's who you turn your anger to, is the next one. And I wonder if you're in the middle, if you don't just turn your anger against everybody. Because one of the hardest lessons I came to realize, and people had been telling me this for a long time, and it never stuck until a mutual friend of ours, Jenny, Jenny and Adam would say to me, you've really changed. You've really changed since we've known you. And one day I said, well, what is it you notice that I changed? And she said, well, you're not as angry as you were before. And I remember I slapped my hand on top of the table and I said, damn it, everybody's telling me that. And I had to hear it from you to realize what they were telling me.
Hmm.
I grew up a very angry child. and there was a lot of anger in my family. People think that because we were a large family, that it was a Norman Rockwell painting every time we sat down to dinner.
Right.
And I have come to terms that there is no functioning family. They're all dysfunctional one way or another. And even though I can't tell you some of the ways my parents went above and beyond,
Hmm.
they did.
Right.
But it was still a dysfunctional family,
Yeah.
and it's hard to see it.
Tell me about school.
I'm going to come across as a very negative person, but I'm not really. I didn't like school. I went to school.
Yeah. That's not negative. That's normal.
I went to school by nuns. Oh my
Oh.
gosh.
Oh.
Oh my God. I went through 13 years from kindergarten all the way up uh, through uh, Catholic education taught by the nuns. Um, the thing that, and it's funny, it was better education if they had only continued one thing. When I started off school in kindergarten, well, it wasn't that way in kindergarten. It was just a typical half a day of kindergarten.
Hmm.
But first grade until third grade, it was a half a day of French and half a day of English.
Really?
And and then they stopped, which I was so happy, in the fourth grade. And French was a language that we spoke at the dinner table. And again, it's my rebelliousness or whatnot. I can't speak French today.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know if it's just the fact that I hated it. I just, whatever it was, I was never a good academic person.
Hmm.
Um, I love history and, I was used to be good in math, but I'm more of a hands-on type of person.
Sure.
So I did not like school. And, but I have to say the education I got was really a top education.
Yeah.
The high school that I graduated from had a high percentage of college acceptance. I did not like school. And so, yeah, I more than school, I would have to say, the community of kids that we had in our neighborhood, it was, like I said, Vermont was cold, and you knew you
Oh
lived
yeah.
in Maine,
Yeah.
And so sometimes, there'd be a couple feet of snow out there, and the wind's blowing, and it's got a chill factor of 25 below, and we were out there playing.
Yes, we were.
We were out there, and in the summertime, you know, every house had a porch on it, and the front porch, and people sat on that front porch, and we played tag in the streets or kickball or whatever,
Yeah.
and it was just, and if you did something down the street and the neighbors saw it, they thought nothing of calling and letting your parents know. And speaking of calling too, I remember something that children of today, or even millennialist, or whatever you call that word, uh, um, we had what they call party lines on the telephone.
Yes.
So the phone, depending on how many rings it was, and it was, then you knew if it was yours, if it was 3 rings and a stop, or if it was there were sometimes 3 and 4 party lines. And it used to be fun if you could get away with it, just listening and receive it just so, and covering the mouthpiece so they couldn't hear, and you could hear the conversation. So, yeah, the phone system was something else. But anyways, going back to that growing up, yeah, it was really community. It was really tight-knit. Most people have heard the story. We never locked the doors on the
Yeah.
house.
Yeah.
Just, yeah, it, today, I live in a duplex and drive up underneath the duplex, park in the garage, hit the garage door, it goes down, and you don't have to deal with anyone. And I find that very hard
Yeah.
to deal with it as an adult now.
You feel a sense of isolation?
Yes. Yeah. I don't know if it's just my thinking or if it's a Southern thing that I have found being here. You just, down here, you just don't show up.
How do you mean? Oh.
Just
You
show
don't-
up at someone's door and say,
Yes.
"Hi, here I am."
Yeah.
And that was very common. There was there was a knock at the door, and it was just like, well, someone's coming for coffee or something.
Yeah.
And I just don't experience that here.
Yeah.
But a lot of this stuff I have to create myself. Let it known. Happy when they do it. Someone's going to test me one day. I'm happy about it. So,
You heard it here first.
yeah.
Jacques said you can come to his house unannounced.
Yeah. I still haven't given you my address yet, though.
Tell me about friends growing up. Did you have, obviously you had 12 people in your family that were eligible for such a position if they were interested.
Mm-hmm. Or if I wanted them.
Right.
That was my choice to make. I had a couple neighborhood friends.
Yeah.
As I get older now, I knew a lot of people, but I did not have a lot of friends. I had close associates, but they weren't friends.
Right.
They weren't the type of people that I could tell my whole story to. And so I don't know how. Do you censor out stuff that's said on here?
If I need to.
Yeah.
Especially if you say it and then you go, ooh, don't say, no.
No.
Yeah, that's okay.
No, I was really jerk, growing up, and I knew no better.
Yeah.
Because it was just I had a different type of childhood.
How were you a jerk?
Well, to get attention, I was probably the biggest one who squealed on everybody else.
Really?
Yeah.
You were the rat.
Yep.
Wow.
And and I did it mainly just to get recognition. And it wasn't only in the family.
Yeah.
It was wherever.
Yeah.
So I could be noticed.
Yeah.
I really felt lost as a child in that family.
I can imagine. So 1951, when you were born, a little bit different from 82 when I was born. Culture. Well, what was life like, especially in Vermont, in terms of culture, music, television? Did you guys have all of that growing up?
I remember the first TV coming in. Growing up, TVs was not a thing in my household.
Right.
And the only excitement I remembered was the people, their last name was Morewood, and they lived around the corner from us. And on Saturday mornings was the only time cartoons would come on.
Yep.
And so we would all run over there. They would let us watch cartoons with them. I don't remember what cartoon would start, but I do remember the last show that would be, it'd be Lassie,
Mm-hmm.
and then it would be a show called Sky King. And then that was the end of it. Like I say, we were more outdoors players growing up.
Sure.
We were more card players in the house, game board players in the house. Monopoly was very big. There's a card game that people here in the South, I'm just starting to teach them. It's called cribbage. And it took me 9 years to find someone who wanted to learn how to play cribbage since I've been here. So yeah, we were more game players.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and then the we got a TV, and the TV was in the kitchen, and we used to take the chairs around the table, semicircle, in the corner. It was a good sized kitchen, and we would watch TV, and very limited.
Yep.
Walt Disney was on Sunday nights.
Yep.
And that's probably one of the very few shows. And then Beverly Hillbillies and all these, and it started to get more popular. As time went on, they moved the TV into the living room, and then we got a color TV, and then it was cable, and then it got less time outside.
Yeah. Yeah. So when did you graduate high school?
1969. I just had my 50th class reunion.
Wow. Did you go?
Of course.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Was it fun?
Yes. I can't believe how some of these people got old.
I know, right?
I know.
Did you tell them that?
Of course.
Yeah. I would expect no less of you.
That's right. You know me well enough.
You graduated in 69. Obviously, that's a very tumultuous year in American life in general. Do you have any specific memories of that?
Yes. Major one. I went to Europe for 6 weeks.
Okay.
And, my father grew up in a depression,
Mm-hmm.
and he grew up raising 13 kids, and he was very cautious, and he wanted to, he was always concerned if anything should happen to him that my mother would be taken care of. So he was really quite the penny pincher, and that I was not. And so I had a chance to go to Europe right after high school, which was unheard of in the place that I grew up, to just go to Europe.
Yeah.
And my father thought I was foolish by wasting my money, but I had a ball. I was gone for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And I think it's really, I just saw, that's where it goes back to my being a poor student. Here's a good example. I don't grasp unless I'm a hands-on type of person.
Mm-hmm.
So when I went to Europe, and I remember being a Versailles, the big palace, and that's where the treaty was signed, and just actually seeing this, all of a sudden it clicked in my mind.
Yeah.
And it became, I really feel like my curiosity really got started, and my education got started when I left high school and I went into the real world, in which it was a hands-on situation that I was able to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. Man. Where all did you go in Europe?
Italy, France, Germany, Holland, Belgium, England.
So all of Europe.
Yeah.
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 That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Did you go with friends?
It was a group. This is really interesting. It was the Sisters of Mercy were incorporated with the Mormon Church, in which the Mormon Church was sponsoring the trip, and the Sisters of Mercy were the ones they were raising funds for their building of their new convent or something. And
No kidding.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I
I knew
would
nothing about the Mormon church. It was forbidden to even ask questions about it.
just take the ticket and
That's
go.
right.
Oh man. Wow. That's such a weird
Combination.
pairing.
Yeah.
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 Huh. Very fun.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so you get back from Europe. Did you go to college?
No.
Okay, I didn't think so.
No.
What happened?
I went to work.
Mm-hmm. Doing what?
At the time when did I start? Okay, before that, we had to start work young because we contributed to the family income. Uh, we paid room and board. Um, I had a job where my paycheck would go right home, right to my parents. And if they'd give me some spending money, but it went towards my clothes, my education. High school it was a private school. It was, but at the time I graduated from high school, it was $300 a year per family. That's
Oh,
that school today is now $10,000 a year per child.
that doesn't surprise me. Okay, so no, wait a minute. Hang on. Back up just a little bit.
Yeah.
You said you guys would pay room and board as kids
Yes.
living at home.
Yes.
So when did you start working?
Okay. I started. I had got a paper route at 12.
Uh-huh.
And then in the summertime, there was a snack stand out on the lake. I used to hitchhike out there early in the morning, peel potatoes until they had enough French fries for the day, evening, and then hitchhike back home. I probably made $15 a week.
Wow.
And then from there, I went on to work for a grocery chain. By that time, it was called Grand Union.
Uh-huh.
And I worked for them till even after high school, after I came back from Europe. I worked for them for a while. And then I went to work for General Electric, who eventually changed their name quite a few times. And I was with that company for 39 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Also, one thing I'm not telling you is that they had wonderful help, and it happened to be our pediatrician. Her was Dr. Levinson. It was a woman doctor,
Uh-huh.
and she sort of adopted us as her family. She'd never had children. She was married, but we didn't know about it. But she was divorced, never had children. Took us under her arms, and she made sure that come Christmas time, that was a stressful year. She got all the gifts, and
Wow.
I mean everything we ever wanted, we had. So yes, it's still I'm not going to take away the toughness it was for my parents,
Sure.
but there was help that came in.
Man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
I derailed you. So, so you started working, and when you came back from Europe, is that when you were working for GE?
I started to work shortly after that. Yeah.
And you still lived at home, and so your paycheck just went home
Oh
to mom
no!
and
By
dad.
that time, I was paying room and board, and it was. Let me see. I started in 70. I think around 71, 1971. I forget, we're in a different era here, and because I worked there for 39 years, and I bought my parents' home from them in 1976.
Wow. Okay. Why did you buy it from them?
Um, I was I've always been a slow learner, and I'm seeing it now, and I'm not saying it with shame. And and this is really getting kind of deep here, so you may stop me whenever you want.
Nope.
Um, but by this time, I'm looking for acceptance,
Mm-hmm.
and I take it you're going to ask a question. I don't know if I should answer it before you ask the question.
You can answer any question
Okay.
you think I'm going to ask.
Okay, good. So around the young age, I knew I was different. I see that smile on your face. And so,
I was just wondering how long you were going to go before you said something.
well, I was waiting for you.
Well, that's not. Look, that's not who you are.
Let me just finish my
So
story.
go
You
ahead.
gave me the mic. Hush.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I was attracted to boys,
Mm-hmm.
and yet I heard all the stories. I heard about the guy that was the homosexual down the road. This is back before the word gay was used,
Right.
because gay meant you're happy. That the queer, as they call them, also.
Yeah.
They look very horrible names. And, someone lived down the street, and what they were describing is what I experienced.
Hmm.
And it had to be the big secret. And so the big secret meant I still had to be accepted. And it's funny, I'm trying to lead one life, and yet the other life has a hold on me and won't let go.
Hmm.
And I was always afraid. My family was a family of appearances. We would go to church. We didn't have a car until later in life. And we lived about 3/4 of a mile from church, and it was uphill. And I can remember we're all going to church, two in a row. My mother and father in the back. The older ones are in the front. And those of us in the middle better not step out of line, because someone was going to get us. And so I just never felt in place, because these guys were playing football, or they were playing baseball, or they were dating this one, or they're talking about having sex with that one. And none of that interests me.
Yeah.
And I had to pretend, I had to adjust. And so that's where I was the instigator. That's where I sought my attention.
Hmm.
So when it came to the buying of the home, I figured, and someone had said later on in life, it's a gay man's world, that he has to take care of his parents.
Hmm.
And so I bought the house of my parents with the intentions of taking care of them. And I wrote a poem one time about it, and I said, as long as I was caring for them, I would never have to worry about being abandoned by them, because they were going to need me.
Oh.
So, and I'm seeing all this now.
Hmm. So you said you knew you were different at a very young age, or relatively young age.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember what that process of realization was like?
Yeah, everything was shame-based.
Yeah.
And so I had nobody to talk to about this. Nobody.
Yeah.
I slowly learned how to act out.
Yeah.
And I took some horrible chances as a young child. First of all, it was with a couple of the boys that were curious and whatnot, and
Mm-hmm.
they wouldn't go as far as I would go. And then there was a couple times it got to grown men. I was a child, and it was grown men.
Wow.
And then it came to the time that I was really perplexed. I didn't know how to handle this, who to talk to. And I didn't. So I went to see the parish priest and told him about it. And this past year, I finally came very public after over 55 years and announced the name of the priest that molested me as a child. And I really had to get angry when I did it. I had friends who were very strong Catholics. Like I said, I just went back to my 50th class reunion. And, and the particular friend was a very strong Catholic, and when all this abuse came out, he was always saying that everybody was in for money. And I would say to him, I'm not in for money.
Yeah.
So when I went to my class reunion, I knew that there was something had happened with this priest here, and with another classmate. And he had said something to me, but never came across the full story. But I knew that for years, for a good 25 years, I knew something had happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was at the class reunion, and I walked up to him and I said, I'm going to talk to you sometime. And he lived in another state and all. And I said, well, and he got concerned, like I don't know if he knew I was in 12-step programs. I had to make amends or something. He's like, what's going on here? You know? And I just said, no. I said, I just want to tell you I was molested by this priest here. And he was looking down at some cards and whatnot. And his head came up straight, and he looked at me straight in the eye, and his eyes got really big. And he said, I've never told anyone, only my wife, but this is what happened. And it was with this priest. I knew something had happened, but I never knew for sure.
Yeah.
And the next day, I was talking to another classmate, and I was telling him of the conversation that happened the night before, but not telling anyone who's who here.
Right, no specifics.
No specifics. And he looked up straight at me and said, I never told anyone. And so I came home. I went home, came here to Tennessee. And I remember landing, and I'm saying to myself, the best move I ever did was to leave Vermont. Because at this time in my life, Tennessee is the safest place for me.
Yeah.
And I don't have to argue with the people that knew this priest. I don't have to prove anything to anybody else. I only have to tell my story. And so when I got here, I did some investigation, and there was a lot of things that happened. And I called the state's attorney's office, and I filed a complaint, and I called the diocese, the Catholic diocese in Vermont, and gave them my story. And, people were thinking, well, you could go for the money. I don't want the money.
Right.
I don't want the money. But my story is out there. And, some people can't take it. And it's funny. My older sister and I had a conversation, and she said, how many in the family have noticed what you wrote on Facebook and responded to it? They don't know how to talk about it. They don't want to talk about it. And it goes back to I don't know, I'm jumping all over the place here. But it goes back to the question, when I realized it was something different. I knew all along.
Yeah. Changing gears a little bit.
Okay.
What did you do when you worked for GE?
Quality assurance. I just made sure the parts as they came off the machines were made correctly.
What they were supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
So you're working QA.
Mm-hmm.
You bought the house.
Took care of the parents.
Took care of the parents. How old were they at that point? 60s?
My father was in his late 50s. My age difference between my father and mother, I think, are 6 years.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So mom was in her 60s and my dad was in his late 50s. Early 60s, late 50s.
Mom was older.
Yes.
That's exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So they weren't, so when he passed, I mean, they were still separate for, she survived him by 20-something years.
25 years.
Yeah.
Let me back up here.
Mm-hmm.
When I say I took care of my parents, My father was a diabetic. In the end, he had both his legs cut off.
Oh.
And so there was just myself and my mom in the house and my dad. And throughout the night, for 3 years, my father could only sleep a certain position and he needed help to turn over because he didn't have any legs to turn himself over. So he'd ring a bell between my mother and I throughout the night, would get up, go down, turn him over, get him comfortable, go back up, go to sleep. Could last half hour, could last 2 hours.
For 3 years, huh?
Yeah. And then my mom lived 25 years after.
When your dad passed, how'd your mom take it? Because it sounds like it wasn't shocking. It sounds like
No,
his health was failing.
His health was failing. He passed at the age, to show if he was 63 or 65. But yeah, his health had, as being a diabetic, and
Yeah.
it slowly took a turn on him. And my mom, I don't think she grieved any different than others. There's just a factor of not only losing someone, but the factor of being alone
Yeah.
and getting old.
Yeah.
And, having 13 kids, I think she started to get older feeling wise than the average 65-year-old person does today. I'm 68 years old and I feel like I'm 35
Sure.
until I get out of bed in the morning. Then I know. So yeah, I think she went through the normal mourning process.
Yeah. What was your life like working the day job, taking care of the folks, living in the house, but having your secret identity, your deep shame that you don't want to share with anybody? What was that like?
There was such a 12-step program that's called Sexaholics.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, SA. I'm putting in a plug for them here. And it became an addiction for me because I could not function as to be who I really am.
Mm.
So everything is done in shame and in being hidden. So it would mean find out where there could be possible action, get the fix that I need, run home, close the door, and it's like it never happened and it was never going to happen again.
Wow.
And yet that addiction just takes over.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying being gay is an addiction.
No, I know what you mean. The
Yeah.
compulsive
Well,
behavior.
whoever hears this is what
Fair
I'm
enough.
trying to get that across to,
Yep.
And so, so that's the way it was. It was always, and of course, it was always constant shame.
Right. Did your parents know?
Everybody had to know. Come on.
What? No.
Did everybody want to talk about it? Heck, no. Neither
Right.
did I.
Yeah.
I didn't want to talk to them about it.
Right.
But
But I mean, there wasn't a time when you sat down and said, "Hey, okay."
God, that even turns my stomach right now. I have butterflies. They're just,
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I just, no, I couldn't do it.
Wow.
It's still that fear of abandonment, even now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man. So then what happened? Mom's a widow.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the two of you in the house at this point.
Okay. I do need to tell the story about, before we go on, about Mom and all.
Yeah.
Like I said, we used to get up in the middle of the night, throughout the night, and go turn my father over. And this one night I came home, I'd gone to bed. My father had a cold and he just couldn't, he kept on coughing. I could hear him upstairs. And I couldn't take it anymore, and I went down and I said, Dad, what's wrong? Are you, do you need cough medicine or anything? He said, no, your mother just gave me some. And I said, oh, okay. And as I was leaving his room, my mother was in the spare bedroom She got up to see what was going on. She headed to bed. I climbed the stairs, and my father called me by name. And I said, "What?" And he said, "I love you." And I responded back, and I said, "I love you too." And he died.
Oh.
And so, I always thought that, that was, and it probably is. I'm just working through a lot of stuff here, but I always thought that that was like a gift to me, because I'm
Yeah.
the only one that he said that to.
Wow.
I was the last person he spoke to when he died.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know if we'll get to it, but years later, I really questioned, why did he say it? And maybe it's my mourning process, even though it's been, all these years, 35 years, it could be still a part of the mourning process that's going on.
Yeah.
So from there, I took care of my mother. And the thing is, when it came to the house, I might have be paid the mortgage on it, but it sure as heck was never my house.
Yeah.
My mother was born in that house. She was the baby of the family. She ruled that house. My father was the worker. She was the ruler. And all. And the only time the house was mine was when something went wrong and it needed to be repaired. And then it would be, and it sounds like a big long sob story, but it is. Then the family would come. I have family all over. Of the 13, I have one brother that's dead, and I have two sisters that live in Vermont. Everybody else is across the country.
See, everybody's scattered.
Yeah. And so they used to come to the house, and I'd be the one that had to get the house ready for them. And they would come in, and they would take over, and I was non-existent. And a lot of it was my fault.
How do you mean?
I never set boundaries. Because my mother took care of the boundaries. And we never talked back to our parents. Never.
Yeah.
And so, in the meantime, I believe that I was born to be a caregiver. I work for hospice now on a part-time basis. And so, my mother, kind of funny here, my mother had a sister. She was a widow. She had a couple widow sisters. And my Aunt Julie lived down the street from me. And I came home one day, and my mother informed me that Aunt Julie was moving in with us.
Into your house?
Into my house.
Oh.
And in which I kind of felt I was responsible for Aunt Julie, and I did, So that went along. That went along well for 2 weeks. And then I come home one day and I pull into the driveway, and all I can hear is the TV's blasting. And my mother and Aunt Julie had an argument. And my mother wants Aunt Julie out. And the rooms were side by side, and they were both watching the same TV show, and they were both had it loud so they could hear it, but so could all the neighbors, and I knew I was in trouble then.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, my mother became very dependent on me.
Yeah.
And all. And so, I did the best I could, and then 25 years later, she has a stroke, and I bring her to the hospital, and she goes through rehab. She's 94 years old. I bring her home on a Wednesday that Saturday morning at noontime, was I was really going crazy then. It was 24/7. My siblings were trying to come in to help me take care of her, but I couldn't leave because the nurse was going to come and I had to hear what the nurse had to say. I couldn't trust, not that I couldn't trust, I just felt it was my responsibility to know all this stuff, you know. And so came the day that it was Saturday, I walked in to check on her and I looked at her and I said, she's dying. I knew it right there. Just looked at her. You could tell, you know.
Yeah.
So I called in the priest and I called in. She had one sister left that was 96 years old. Had my cousins bring her down. My mother was in a coma. And she woke up from her coma. I was the only one in the room. She woke up from her coma. She looked at me. She thanked me. She told me she loved me. She said goodbye and she closed her eyes. And she died the next morning with 10 of her 13 children around her bed.
Wow.
So there were a lot of frustration. Couldn't tell my mother anything. I'd come home and she'd have a little votive candle, dripping wax burning on a piece of paper in the kitchen, and she had left the house, and it was continuous, you know.
Yeah.
And yet, when they left, I felt, I don't know how to explain it. I felt a lot of things, a lot of anger towards my siblings. Not necessarily that they didn't help out, because my baby sister had helped out a lot, but anger because I was never respected in my own home. It was, to them, it was their home because they grew up there.
Yeah.
And never saw it as my house, so I had no decision making. And yeah.
So when your mom passed, how long before you moved to Nashville?
2 years.
What did you do during that time? What was that?
I was still working, and I was getting ready to retire. And I went to one of the, never traveled or anything for my job. It was always the main plant. Times were changing. Technology was changing. This is back in 2008. Times were changing. And they would start farming out jobs, so they didn't need to plant and whatnot. We had a little small business in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and I came down. It was just a small operation, and it was there for 3 years. And at the end of 3 years, they were closing down, and I came down to help close down.
Okay.
I was going to retire, and while I was here, well, I was in Hattiesburg, just like, you're crazy if you don't go up to Nashville. So I came up, and there was a men's retreat going on, so I went to that. And I met some friends, and then I went back to Hattiesburg, and I was kind of lonely, you know. I met these new people. And so then I came back up again for a men's retreat, and did them all. And and so I came, I really met some friends then. Went back to Hattiesburg, and it was so horrible. I really had a longing for these friends in my life, you know. Someone I could tell my secrets to and all.
Yeah.
And so I came back to say goodbye. And they had what they called a Quaker clearing. I don't know if you're familiar with a Quaker clearing. It's something apparently that they do in which you get a group of men around you, or women, depends on who's doing the clearing, and you tell them what's going on in your life. And all they can do is ask you questions. They cannot give you any suggestions. They can't make suggestions. Just ask the questions. And so they sat around me, and the first question is, so what's going on? And I said, well, I'm going back to Vermont. And they said, what are you going to do there? And I said, I'm going to retire. And they said, well, can you do that here? And it again was a series of questions, and I decided to move to Tennessee.
Yeah.
And I went back and I sold my home. It was in a family's homestead. And I told my siblings that I was moving, and they thought I was moving to retirement home. They said, no. I said, well, where are you moving? I said, Nashville. And they said, you're crazy. They thought it was midlife crisis. And I came here.
Yeah.
And it was the best thing I did and the worst thing I did. It's because the reason I came here for these guys that I thought knew me, were going to be supportive of me, turned on me.
Mm.
And I was stuck in Franklin, Tennessee in a condo that I started to remodel, had it all torn out, couldn't sell it. I didn't have another place to go back to Vermont, and I had to start life the hard road here.
Yeah. I'm glad you did.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I am too.
Man. So what's life in Nashville like now?
Life in Nashville is a hands-on learning about what life is really supposed to be all about for me. I came out in Nashville publicly, and I was 63 years old, so 5 years ago. I'd done some crazy things besides that. Jump out of an airplane 3 miles up in the air.
Yes.
Just really starting to be a little more adventurous. And like I say, Nashville is a safe place for me. It's a place that I can understand my life a lot better than before. I can be at peace. I finally can be at peace with myself. I can be at peace with myself that I am not a person going to hell because I have same-sex attraction. I have a purpose in life. I have a lot of garbage to get rid of, and I'm able to do it now. Wonderful friends, and true friends. That's what makes them wonderful. They know my secrets. I'm in a group of men that there's nothing, none of them have shocked me, and I've tried. Tried a few times. So, yeah, that's what Nashville has been like for me.
Good. Man. Wow. That went faster than I thought it would.
Okay.
Well done, sir.
Thank you. I'm waiting for those 3 questions now.
Yeah. 3 questions. Okay. What are you afraid of?
Being abandoned. And that means, and that fear of abandon controls my whole life.
Yeah.
Financially, I feel that if I'm not able to support myself, that everyone's going to leave me. That I'll be underneath the Jefferson Street Bridge. Yeah, fear of abandon is a biggie.
What do you regret?
That I didn't leave Vermont sooner. That I felt everything was my responsibility. I don't regret taking care of my parents. But I regret not finding a life for myself until I moved to Tennessee.
Who is God?
In my eyes? At one time, there was a time where I was taking this course, and they said, use crayons and whatnot and draw a picture of what God looks like. Is it Dan Johnson? That's The Rock.
Dwayne Johnson.
Okay. So I was thinking, and I thought, well, I have a saying. Someone came to my house one time, and we had dinner, and he said, if I was to start another church, the dining room table would be the sanctuary. And so I started to think, if I was to draw a picture of who God is, it would be at a big table. And then I get into the churchy thing, and this imagination, sitting high on the throne, it rolls on and on. I said, that's bullshit. I said, I see him as Dwayne Johnson. Mingling among the people, this big strapping guy that he's on your side. He'll protect you to no end. As jolly as could be, waiting for the next hug. That's how I describe God.
Thank you, Jacques.
Well, thank you for inviting me to tell my story.
Yeah, absolutely. As I'm recording this, I just remembered one of the first times I really got to hang out with Jacques, when I got to know him, was soon after we met. For some reason, I needed to make a trip to IKEA. And if you're not in Nashville, then you probably don't realize, but Nashville doesn't have an IKEA. The closest one is in Atlanta, and that is 4 hours away. So I needed to make an IKEA run, and Jacques, for whatever reason, somehow made himself available, because I needed somebody to ride with me, just because that's a long drive there and back without anybody to talk to. And so we ran down to IKEA, we got the stuff we needed, and we were driving back. And somewhere about the halfway mark, somewhere in Chattanooga, I started not feeling good at all. And by the time we reached the top of Mont Eagle, we had to stop for gasoline, and I filled up the truck. And when I got back in the van, I was shaking violently. And Jacques had to take over driving, and we continued that way all the way home. He dropped me at my doorstep, and I stumbled into the house and was very, very sick. And long story short, turns out that when I get a fever, I shake violently. But that was the first time that I ever experienced that, and it was with Jacques. And it couldn't have happened around a better person. He took it completely in stride and was unbelievably kind and comforting to me in the midst of what was, for me, as a young man, a terrifying experience. I was 27, 28 at the time, and didn't know what in the world was going on and why I was suddenly unable to stop my body from freaking out. Anyway, that's the kind of guy Jacques is. He had no problem taking over and taking care of me. I'm so honored that I know him, and I'm even more excited that you guys get to know him now. Like I said in my speech at the beginning, guys, 2020's here. We're going to get into elections, and everybody's going to be mean to everyone because nobody understands the truth the way I understand it. And so, roar! Don't do it. Don't give in. Love each other. Be kind to one another. Better still, be kind to them by asking their story. You might shockingly find out that they have some piece of this puzzle called life that you don't have, and that you need more of. That's what's been happening to me more and more and more. My political views have not changed. My religious views haven't changed, but my compassion for other humans has only grown exponentially. And guys, life is better when you love people. It really, really is. If you like this show and you want to help support it, the best way you can do that is by sharing it with your friends and family. Connect them, send them a link. Better still, you can send them directly to our website. That's butenoughAbout.me. That's the website, www.butenoughAbout.me. And they can find the show right there. They can connect to their favorite podcasting app, whether it's Google or Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or Spotify. They're all right there, as well as all of the portraits I make of all of the folks, including the portrait I made of Jacques while he was here. Guys, go over to the website, check those out. It would mean the world to me. If you don't want to go to the website, you can always find us on social media. We are on both Facebook and Instagram. Both of those are /ButEnoughAboutMe podcast. Again, that's /ButEnoughAboutMe podcast, Facebook and Instagram. they're on there, and I update those pretty regularly. Though, a quick apology, Pastor Henry, I completely forgot to post it on Instagram, and it's because it was New Year's Eve, and I just was exhausted. I'm sorry, but it's on Instagram now. Go see Pastor Henry, go see Jacques, and throw a like their way. That's another good way to share the show with a friend, is to send them a link to something like that. If you enjoyed the bumper music, you should thank Mr. Jace Hackman, just like I do every single time I publish one of these. Jace did all the bumper music, and he is a very talented musician. Go check out his work at jacehackman.com, or you can come through my website, butenoughAbout.me, and there's a link to his stuff down toward the bottom of the page. Similarly, if you like our logo, you can thank Mr. KC Jones for that. His website is imkcjones.com. Go say hi to him. Better still, throw some work his way. If you like the show and you want to share it publicly via your bumper or some other flat surface, I have stickers that I would love to share with you, because I still have a few of them, and I have them on every vehicle at my house, so I really can't put any more on without being obnoxious. So, if you want a bumper sticker, they are 4 inches by 4 inches and bright yellow and have half of my dumb face on it, but only half. So shoot me an email, tyler@butenoughAbout.me, or through one of the social media sites. Send me a message. Get me your address. I will mail it to you. It costs nothing. I will cover postage. I just want to get them out there because, frankly, they're taking up too much space in my house. Similarly, if you know someone who should be on this show, convince them to contact me. Again, tyler@butenoughAbout.me. That's a great way to get in touch with me. I am setting up interviews with folks that I don't know at all, and so those episodes are going to be coming out in the coming weeks and months, and I can't wait to share those with you. They're going to be so much fun, because it's kind of like when you go to see a movie and you haven't watched any of the trailers and you just walk in blind. That's what I love it. I love it. Speaking of hearing stories, you have an assignment. Sometime in the next couple weeks, please go find somebody, buy them a cup of coffee or a glass of whiskey, and ask them to tell you their story. My name is Tyler Andrews, but enough about me.